Anna and Bernard had always dreamed of a home that offered peace and simplicity, a retreat from the chaos of city life. After years of living in a cramped apartment in a bustling urban center, they were finally able to purchase a house in the suburbs. The house itself was modest but filled with charm. It had all the elements they had longed for: a large yard, plenty of space for future plans, and a feeling of calm that they had never experienced in the city. The neighborhood was quiet, surrounded by families who shared the same values, and the air was clean, free from the usual noise and pollution of their previous life. Despite the beauty of the home, there was one feature that Anna couldn't quite embrace: the old barn tucked away at the back of the property. It seemed out of place, standing there in the corner of the yard like a forgotten relic from a bygone era. The barn was weathered, its wooden beams creaked under the weight of time, and the roof had started to sag. Ivy and vines grew over the dilapidated structure, hiding its once pristine wood. Anna couldn't help but see it as an eyesore, something that marred the otherwise perfect view. It felt out of place in the serene setting they had found. On the other hand, Bernard couldn't help but look at that barn and see the promise of something great. To him, it was far from a ruin. It was a canvas waiting to be brought back to life. Where Anna saw only decay, Bernard saw potential. He dreamed of transforming that forgotten space into something meaningful. He envisioned it as a private retreat, a workshop, and a sanctuary where he could pursue his passions and hobbies. He had always been a bit of a tinkerer, and the idea of having a dedicated space to work on projects excited him. Bernard believed that with the right tools and a bit of hard work, he could turn the barn into a personal haven, a place where he could find peace away from the world. Anna, however, didn't share Bernard's enthusiasm. The barn seemed like a burden to her, a space that would require more work than it was worth. "We don't need that old thing," she often said. "We've got so much space here already. Why keep something that's falling apart?" Her thoughts were clear: demolish the barn and turn the area into something more practical, perhaps a small vegetable garden or a patio. She couldn't see the value in keeping it, especially when there were so many other tasks that required attention in their new home. But Bernard was undeterred. He insisted that the barn had potential, that it could be turned into something special, something that could provide him with both a sense of accomplishment and a retreat from the everyday stresses of life. With a glint in his eye, he would say, "Just wait, Anna. Once I've cleaned it out and fixed it up, you'll see. It'll be a space you'll love." His optimism was unwavering, and though Anna wasn't convinced, she agreed to let him take the reins. It was one of those things that, in the grand scheme of their life together, didn't feel worth arguing over. Despite her skepticism, Anna watched as Bernard began to work on the barn. He started by cleaning out the accumulated junk from years of neglect: old furniture, rusty tools, and broken down gardening equipment that had been left behind by the previous owners. Day after day, Bernard spent hours in the barn, clearing the clutter, sweeping out dust, and beginning the painstaking task of repairing the structure. Anna couldn't help but notice his dedication. He seemed completely absorbed in his work, his enthusiasm infectious, even though she remained unsure about the outcome. In the meantime, Anna threw herself into making their house a home. She unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, and decorated the house with touches of warmth. The house began to feel like a sanctuary, something that had been missing for so long. Bernard's days working in the barn became a backdrop to this peaceful new life they were building together. Slowly, though, Anna found herself growing curious about the progress Bernard was making on the barn. even if she didn't fully understand his attachment to it. As the months passed, the couple settled into a rhythm in their new life. Bernard, fortunate enough to work from home most days, spent much of his time in the barn. He began to acquire new tools and equipment. Saws, hammers, drills in the barn began to take shape. Each day, Bernard would return from the hardware store with something new, a set of shelves to install, a workbench, even a set of woodworking magazines. He'd always have an explanation ready, just a little something to make the barn more functional, he would say with a smile. Anna was starting to wonder how much was really necessary for such a small project. But Bernard's excitement was hard to ignore. Still, she remained cautious. "Why do you need all these tools?" she asked one day as Bernard unloaded a new shipment. "Of items, we don't have that much stuff to organize, do we?" Bernard just smiled, his face glowing with pride. "You never know, Anna. It's always good to be prepared." He deflected her questions with vague answers, continuing to work on the barn without letting her see the full picture. Each time Anna would ask if she could help, Bernard would insist that the barn was still too dirty, too disorganized, and that once it was more presentable, she could join him. Anna grew frustrated, but at the same time, she couldn't deny that Bernard's determination was paying off. The barn was slowly becoming something more than she had ever imagined. The transformation was gradual, but when she looked at it from a distance, she could see how far Bernard had come. The old barn, once an eyesore, was starting to become a place of pride for Bernard, and Anna couldn't help but admire the dedication he had put into it. Still, she was uneasy and sure of what Bernard was truly doing in that secretive space. Then the unthinkable happened. It started like any other day, with Anna and Bernard enjoying the peaceful rhythm of their life in their new home. But by nightfall, their world was about to be torn apart. A fire broke out in their house, sparked by an electrical fault. The flames spread rapidly, and before they could react, the fire had consumed most of their home. What had once been a sanctuary for them was quickly reduced to ashes. They tried desperately to save their belongings, but there was little they could do against the relentless fire. The only thing Anna and Bernard could do was flee, taking only the most essential items with them. As they stood outside in the night, watching the fire rage, Anna's heart sank. Among the things she had lost in the flames was the china cabineta, treasured family heirloom, passed down from her grandmother. The cabinet wasn't just an object. It was a connection to her past, to memories of her childhood when her grandmother would let her pick a glass from the special collection. Now it was gone, reduced to nothing but ash. The grief was overwhelming, and Anna couldn't help but feel the loss deeply. Though they had managed to escape unharmed, the fire had taken something irreplaceable, a piece of her family's history. In the aftermath of the fire, Anna and Bernard found themselves standing at a crossroads. Everything they had known their home, their memories, was reduced to ashes. But amid the devastation, a new chapter was beginning. They made a silent promise to each other that they would rebuild, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. Together, they would forge a new path. Their decision to move away from the city was driven by a desire for peace, a longing for a simpler life where they could heal from the pain of their loss. After much searching, they finally found a house that spoke to them. It was a modest property, but its charm was undeniable. The house had an old-fashioned simplicity, one that made them feel immediately at ease. The land surrounding the house was vast, stretching out into a lush green lawn that seemed to invite them to relax and unwind. The neighborhood was quiet, with families living in harmony, and the trees around the property whispered in the wind. The sound of birds singing replaced the constant hum of traffic and construction they had grown accustomed to in the city. Here, they could finally breathe. It was a place that promised serenity, the kind of life they had always longed for, a life filled with nature, peace, and the space to grow their dreams. Despite Anna's lingering sorrow, the new house became a place of healing. The peaceful atmosphere of the countryside helped ease the pain of their loss. They spent their days settling into their new life, organizing the house, unpacking boxes, and slowly adapting to the slower pace of life. Each corner of the house was filled with the hope of new beginnings, and while the house was not perfect, it was theirs. It became the canvas on which they could paint a new future together. The backyard, with its sprawling lawn, seemed to promise endless possibilities. Anna, ever the dreamer, envisioned a garden, a place where they could grow vegetables, herbs, and flowers. She pictured herself tending to the plants, nurturing them with care, and watching them flourish as they did in the city. It would be a quiet retreat, a reminder of simpler times. The barn, still tucked away at the back of the yard, stood as a silent witness to the changes in their lives. Anna's feelings about the barn hadn't changed much. Though it was far from a priority, she couldn't bring herself to get rid of it. After all, it wasn't her choice to demolish it. So, she decided to leave it be for now, at least until Bernard had his way with it. Bernard, on the other hand, was once again filled with energy and excitement about the barn. He was eager to begin his work on the old building, and this time, he was more determined than ever to transform it into something worthwhile. He spent hours each day clearing out the remaining debris from the barn, which had been left behind by the previous owners. The space was filled with broken furniture, rusted tools, and discarded gardening materials, all of which seemed to have no place in their new life. Anna, still unsure about the barn, occasionally questioned Bernard about his plans. "What exactly are you going to do with this old thing?" she asked one evening as she watched him clear out yet another pile of junk. "We could use the space for a patio or a small vegetable garden. It seems like a waste to keep this place around." But Bernard would smile, his face filled with quiet determination. "Just wait, Anna. You'll see. I'm going to make it into something special." He was, in fact, already beginning to make changes. As the days passed, Bernard started purchasing new tools and equipment. The sight of the new items puzzled Anna. Why did he need so many things? Some of the tools seemed unnecessary, especially for a simple barn. But Bernard always had an explanation. "You never know when we might need them, Anna. Better to be prepared." His vague answers did little to ease her curiosity, but she couldn't deny the joy he took in his work. While Bernard immersed himself in the barn's transformation, Anna began to notice something else. He had started collecting woodworking magazines, reading them obsessively, and even watching online tutorials about how to use different tools. Bernard had always been a practical man, but woodworking, that was a new interest. She didn't quite understand his sudden enthusiasm for the craft, especially when he had never shown any inclination toward it before. Still, she let him be. The barn was his project, after all, and perhaps it was a way for him to channel his energy after the fire. Anna didn't want to discourage him from something that seemed to give him so much joy. Despite her initial doubts, she saw the spark in his eyes, the same spark he had when they first talked about moving to the countryside. Bernard had always been the optimistic one, the one who believed that even the most challenging situations could be turned into something positive. And though Anna didn't fully understand his vision for the barn, she trusted him as the months passed. Bernard continued working on the barn, and it slowly began to take shape. He cleared out the clutter and started organizing the space with the tools he had collected. Shelves were installed along the walls to store the various items, and a sturdy workbench was set up in the center of the room. Bernard worked tirelessly, day after day, making progress on the barn's transformation. To Anna's surprise, the space became more than just a storage area. It began to feel like a workshop, a place where Bernard could immerse himself in his projects. But what really caught Anna's attention were the small changes she began to notice. One day, a shipment of wood arrived at the house. Bernard explained that he was building shelves for the barn. "It'll help us keep everything organized," he said, though Anna wasn't entirely sure why they needed more shelves when they already had plenty of space in the house. "You'll see," Bernard reassured her. "Once everything's in place, it'll make sense." Still, she remained curious. Why was Bernard so secretive about the barn? Why wouldn't he let her help? Every time she asked if she could join him in organizing the space, he would politely decline. "It's still too messy," he'd say. "Wait until I finish tidying up, then you'll see what I've been working on." But Anna began to suspect there was more to his secretive behavior than he was letting on. What was Bernard really up to in that barn? The answer, though, would not come quickly. Life in their new home carried on, and while Anna remained unsure of Bernard's secret project, she couldn't deny that he was happier. The barn, now slowly transforming into a workspace, seemed to provide him with a sense of purpose, a refuge, where he could immerse himself in his thoughts and work on something meaningful. But even as the barn began to take shape, Anna's curiosity grew. What exactly was Bernard hiding from her? What was he planning to surprise her with? It had been 3 peaceful years since Anna and Bernard moved into their new home, and despite the loss they had experienced, their life together had started to feel whole again. They had built a new life from the ashes of the old one, and though the pain of the fire still lingered in Anna's heart, the warmth of Bernard's love and their shared dreams provided comfort. Their days were filled with simple joys, the mornings spent in their garden, the quiet evenings on the porch, and the slow, steady rhythm of their life away from the city. Bernard, always optimistic, had found a sense of purpose in his barn project, and Anna, although still puzzled by his secretive ways, admired his dedication. On their wedding anniversary, Anna was excited to celebrate the bond they had built over the years. Bernard had always been the one to plan surprises for their special occasions, and this year she felt certain he had something wonderful in store for her. She had no idea what it could be, but the thought of spending the evening with Bernard in their peaceful haven made her heart swell with love. It had been a long journey to get to this point, and every moment with Bernard felt like a gift. On the morning of their anniversary, Bernard was especially cheerful. He had promised Anna that he would take care of the dinner while she would prepare the dessert, adding her special touch to make the evening unforgettable. Bernard had even mentioned that he had something truly special planned for the night, but he wouldn't reveal the details. Anna could hardly wait to see what he had come up with as the day wore on. Bernard left for his office, but his mind wasn't on his work. He couldn't stop thinking about the surprise he had been preparing in secret for months. It was something that, he hoped, would not only mark their anniversary, but also show Anna just how deeply he loved her. He could barely contain his excitement. As he worked through the afternoon, counting down the hours until he could return home and share his surprise with her, by 5:30 p.m., Bernard was ready to leave the office and return home. He packed up his things and said his goodbyes, eager to make his way back to Anna. The weather, however, had other plans. A sudden downpour began as Bernard rode his motorcycle through the streets. He had grown accustomed to the weather, but today the rain came down hard and the roads became treacherous. The visibility was poor and the streets were slick with water, making it difficult for Bernard to keep control of his motorcycle. He tried his best to navigate through the rain, but as the roads grew more slippery, he lost control of the bike. In an instant, Bernard was thrown from his motorcycle, crashing onto the wet pavement. The rain continued to pour, and by the time help arrived, it was too late. Bernard's life was tragically cut short, just hours before the celebration they had been looking forward to. The accident was a cruel twist of fate, one that no one, least of all Anna, could have foreseen. When Anna received the call, her world shattered. The voice on the other end of the phone was shaky and solemn, delivering the worst news she could have imagined. Her heart sank as the words registered. Bernard, the love of her life, was gone. The tears came quickly, overwhelming. How could this happen? How could she be left without him after all they had been through? Her mind raced, and her body went numb. She dropped to the floor, unable to breathe, as the enormity of the loss set in. The days that followed were a blur. The funeral was an unbearable ordeal, as Anna said her final goodbyes to Bernard. It felt unreal, like a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. She clung to the memories of their time together, but the void left by Bernard's absence was impossible to fill. She could no longer picture the life they had dreamed of, a life filled with love, laughter, and growing old together. That future had been ripped away in the blink of an eye. When Anna returned to their home, it felt different. The house that had once been a sanctuary now felt hollow, devoid of the warmth Bernard had brought to it. The silence was deafening, and the walls seemed to close in on her. As she walked through the rooms they had shared, she felt an overwhelming emptiness. The kitchen, once a place of shared meals and laughter, now felt sterile and foreign. The living room, where they had spent so many quiet evenings, now seemed too large and too quiet without him. Just as Anna was sinking into the weight of her grief, there was a knock at the door. She wasn't sure who would be visiting. She had kept to herself in the days following Bernard's death. When she opened the door, she was greeted by a delivery truck, and the driver handed her a small package addressed to Bernard. Anna's heart skipped a beat. What could it be? She stared at the box, confused and a little disoriented. Why was something being delivered for Bernard after everything that had happened? She opened the package, revealing a set of beautiful crystal glasses, delicate and shimmering in the soft light. There was no note, no explanation, just these exquisite glasses, a gift from Bernard. A chill ran through Anna as she held them in her hands. She had no idea why Bernard would have ordered such a gift before his death. It was as if he had known that he would not be there to give it to her himself. It was a mystery, an enigma that left her feeling both comforted and heartbroken. What was this gift meant to symbolize? The answer came to her, not through words, but through a sudden impulse. Anna's heart told her to go to the barn. She had been avoiding it for so long, unsure of what Bernard had been doing in that space. But now, something inside her urged her to open the doors. With trembling hands, Anna approached the barn, her pulse quickening. She pushed open the heavy wooden doors, and what she found inside took her breath away. The barn, once a place of disorganization and clutter, had been transformed. The shelves were neatly arranged, each tool in its proper place. A workbench stood in the center of the room, and the floor was spotless. But the most surprising sight was the large, intricately carved china cabinet standing proudly in the back corner of the barn. It was identical to the one she had lost in the fire, the one that had belonged to her grandmother. Anna's knees went weak, and she stumbled toward it, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't believe her eyes. Bernard, the man who had never shown any interest in woodworking, had spent months learning the craft and building this cabinet with his own hands. He had done this in secret, learning a new skill just to surprise her, just to replace the china cabinet that had meant so much to her as Anna stood there. Her emotions overwhelmed her. The china cabinet wasn't just a piece of furniture, it was a symbol of Bernard's deep love for her. He had gone to great lengths to create something meaningful, something that would remind her of the memories she had lost. In that moment, Anna realized that the gift was not just about the cabinet, it was about the love and devotion that Bernard had poured into it. It was a love that transcended time, a love that would never truly be gone. Tears of grief mixed with tears of gratitude as Anna touched the wood of the cabinet. She could almost hear Bernard's voice reassuring her, telling her that he would always be there. This cabinet, this beautiful, handmade piece of furniture, would be a lasting reminder of the love they shared, a love that would live on in her heart forever.